Welcome to this Soundscape Books recording of The Zenith Deception, a psychological thriller novel by Vivienne Black. Like and subscribe for more. Enjoy. The Zenith Deception. Chapter 1. The Blueprint of Life.
Anna Morel's fingers danced across her keyboard, each keystroke a crisp, deliberate articulation of the order that anchored her world. Her office at Nexus magazine, a sanctuary of stark, almost clinical precision, hummed in quiet contrast to the vibrant chaos of the newsroom, just beyond her soundproofed glass wall. Pens were aligned with geometric exactness. Documents were filed, every pixel on her dual monitors calibrated to perfection. She navigated complex layouts and dense copy with swift, surgical efficiency, a reputation for flawless design and incisive journalism preceding her into every meeting. Colleagues often spoke of her in hushed, admiring tones, sometimes tinged with awe, sometimes with a touch of exasperated respect for her unyielding standards. A soft chime from her internal messaging system broke the spell of concentration, a polite summons from Mrs. Hayes. Anna rose, her movements economical, a study in controlled grace. She walked through the quiet corridors, past the low thrum of other departments. A faint, sweet scent drifted from marketing. Someone was baking, a rare indulgence in the corporate air. Then, the executive suite. Mrs. Hayes, the formidable editor-in-chief, sat behind a sprawling mahogany desk, her gaze steady, offering no hint of what was to come. "Anna, thank you for coming." Mrs. Hayes' voice was a low, steady current. "I have a new assignment for you. A high-profile assignment, one that demands your particular blend of precision and insight." A familiar hum of purpose resonated deep within Anna, a satisfaction that settled in her bones. "Lucas Rain, owner of Zenith. You know the place?" Mrs. Hayes continued, a slight lift of an eyebrow. Anna gave a crisp nod. Zenith was legendary, a byword for exclusivity and the enigmatic allure of its proprietor. He's notoriously reclusive and shies away from publicity. "But we've secured an interview." Mrs. Hayes leaned back, watching Anna. "It's a challenge, Anna. He's not one for easy answers, and his world, it's less structured than yours." The warning landed, a faint tremor against Anna's perfectly ordered mind, but it quickly transformed into an exhilarating spark. Less structured meant an opportunity to apply her rigorous methods to an elusive subject, to extract truth where others had failed. Back in her office, Anna immediately submerged herself in Lucas Rain. She scoured databases, cross-referenced articles, delved into obscure business registries. She sifted through social media mentions, searching for any crumb of personal detail. But the digital footprint of Lucas Rain was remarkably sparse for a man of his stature. Beyond his undeniable business successes, Zenith, a few other high-end ventures, there was a gaping void. No personal anecdotes, no candid photographs, no tell-all interviews. He was a perfectly polished enigma, a ghost in the machine. This absence of tangible data felt like a missing piece, a blank space in her meticulously constructed world, a subtle affront to her sense of order. She shifted, her mind already adapting, a new strategy forming. If the facts were scarce, her questions would have to be sharper, more incisive. She opened a fresh document, the cursor blinking, a silent invitation. Lines of inquiry began to coalesce, meticulously categorized: business philosophy, personal motivations, the ethos of Zenith, his vision for the future. Each question was a finely honed tool, designed to peel back the layers, to expose the man behind the myth. She would not be disarmed by his reclusiveness, she would dismantle it, not with force, but with relentless logic, piece by precise piece. Later that afternoon, as Anna headed towards the staff kitchen for a rare coffee break, a faint shiver ran down her spine. The AC was always set too high in this building. She encountered Mark. He leaned against the doorframe, a casual posture that barely concealed the sharp competitive glint in his eyes. Mark, a fellow journalist, was her closest rival for the top assignments, his ambition, a thinly veiled, constant presence. "Heard you got the rain profile," Mark said, his tone a practiced blend of casual interest and something Anna couldn't quite decipher. "Big one, though. Lucas Rain isn't exactly known for playing by the rules." He pushed off the doorframe, taking a step closer. "He's got a reputation, a certain unpredictability. And you, Anna, you're so precise, so straight-laced." A faint smile played on his lips, but his eyes held a flicker that might have been concern, or perhaps just a subtle challenge. Anna's mind briefly flickered to the coffee machine. Was it broken again? Then refocused. Anna met his gaze, her own unwavering. "My precision is my strength, Mark," she replied, her voice cool and even, perhaps a fraction too sharp. "Unpredictability simply means he hasn't yet encountered someone capable of charting his course." She offered a small dismissive nod and continued past him, the faint scent of his cologne lingering for a moment before the sterile office air reclaimed it. Later that evening, Anna closed her laptop, the screen reflecting her determined gaze. She would unravel Lucas Rain, not by stepping into his chaos, but by imposing her own rigorous structure upon it. His life's design might be hidden, but hers remained unyielding. She rose, the sterile office air giving way to the crisp, expectant chill of the evening. The city awaited, and with it, the first calculated steps into the unpredictable orbit of Lucas Rain.
Chapter 2: The First Unscripted Scene.
The streetlights blurred into streaks of gold and violet as Anna's taxi approached Zenith, a towering edifice of dark glass and hushed secrets, alien to her meticulously mapped city. A faint tremor, an almost imperceptible shift, disturbed the rigid plates of her carefully constructed composure as the cab pulled to a silent stop. Even on the edge of the city's most exclusive district, the air seemed to thrum with a different kind of energy, a low, vibrant hum that bypassed her intellect and settled somewhere deeper, unsettling her. A silent doorman, a figure carved from shadow and impeccable tailoring, opened her door before the taxi had fully halted, his eyes sweeping over her with unnerving efficiency. Anna stepped out, her tailored blazer a small shield against the cool night and the imposing facade. The interior was a study in controlled opulence. Every surface gleamed with a dark, rich luster. Whispers of conversation seemed absorbed by the velvet and polished stone. The air was thick with the scent of aged whiskey, expensive perfume, and something else, something elusive and dangerous, like the promise of a secret. Her gaze swept over the room, cataloguing details with the precision of a seasoned journalist. The hushed clink of ice, the low, sophisticated murmur of voices, the subtle play of light on crystal and chrome. Then she saw Lucas Rain, a magnetic focal point, even from across the sprawling lounge. He moved with an effortless grace, a predator among the elite, his laughter a low, resonant note that seemed to carry above the general hum. Anna made mental notes on the bar's clientele, a mix of old money, new tech, and the indefinable glitterati who seemed to exist purely on charisma and whispered influence. As she stood, a waiter, equally discreet as the doorman, approached her with a practiced, almost invisible glide. "Miss Morel? Mr. Rain is expecting you." His voice was a soft murmur, barely audible above the lounge's sophisticated din. Anna nodded, a single sharp movement, and followed him. He led her through a labyrinthine arrangement of secluded booths and intimate alcoves. Each turn felt like a deeper descent into a world she had only observed from the carefully curated pages of Nexus magazine. They reached a secluded, dimly lit booth, more a private lounge than a mere table, where Lucas Rain sat. He rose as she approached, a slow, deliberate movement that held a certain theatricality. His smile was both genuine and a carefully constructed facade, revealing nothing yet inviting everything. "Anna Morel," he said, his voice a low, smooth cadence. "It's a pleasure to finally meet the architect of Nexus's impeccable narratives." Anna felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, not quite unease, but a destabilizing warmth that prickled at her skin. She extended her hand, her grip firm, attempting to project her usual professional cool. "Mr. Rain," she said, "thank you for making time." She settled into the plush leather seat opposite him, her meticulously organized notepad and pen already in hand, a small fortress of order in his domain of charming chaos. "I've prepared a few questions to begin if you don't mind." Lucas leaned back, a faint, amused smile playing on his lips, and gestured dismissively with one hand. "Questions?" he purred. "My dear Miss Morel, I prefer conversations. Tell me, what truly fascinates you about the world? Beyond the headlines, beyond the perfectly placed pixels on a page, what sparks your curiosity?" Anna blinked. Her carefully constructed opening shattered before she'd even uttered a word. This was not how interviews went. This was not her blueprint. I find the unseen mechanics of power fascinating," she managed, trying to pivot, to bring the conversation back to him. "The individuals who shape culture from the shadows." He chuckled, a low, rich sound that resonated through the intimate space. "And what shadows do you dance in, Anna? A woman of your precision, your undeniable brilliance. There must be something beyond the polished articles, a secret garden in your ordered mind." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense, disarmingly direct. It was a gaze that didn't just see her, but seemed to peel back layers, seeking out the hidden vulnerabilities she kept so carefully guarded. "My secret garden is my work," she stated, perhaps a little too sharply, feeling a flush creep up her neck. But Lucas merely smiled, unperturbed. "Work is a reflection, not the source," he countered softly. "Tell me, Anna, what makes you feel truly alive? What makes you lose control, even for a moment?" His questions were like gentle, insistent probes, each one chipping away at her professional armor. She found herself oddly thrilled by the challenge, by the sheer audacity of his refusal to conform. It was dangerous, exhilarating, like standing at the edge of a precipice she never knew existed. A palpable spark, hot and undeniable, ignited between them. It wasn't just physical, it was an intellectual friction, a clash of wills that left her breathless. She cleared her throat, forcing herself to focus, to regain some semblance of her journalistic self. "Perhaps we could discuss your vision for Zenith, Mr. Rain," she proposed, her voice steadier than she felt. "Its rapid ascent in the city's nightlife scene is quite remarkable given your elusive public persona." Lucas took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving hers, a knowing glint in their depths. "Zenith is merely a stage, Anna. A place where stories unfold. Where people reveal their true selves, often without realizing it. My vision is simply to facilitate that." He paused, a faint enigmatic smile playing on his lips. "And as for my persona, some stories are best left unwritten, wouldn't you agree?" The interview, if it could even be called that, concluded not with answers, but with a dizzying array of new questions, all of them directed at her, all of them resonating deep within. Anna felt a strange mix of frustration and exhilaration as she rose to leave. She hadn't extracted a single usable quote for her profile. Yet she felt more exposed, more seen, than after any interview in her career. The air around Lucas still hummed, with an almost electric charge, a residue of their intense exchange. Stepping back out into the cool night air, the city lights seemed sharper, the sounds more defined, as if her senses had been recalibrated. The taxi ride home was a blur. Her mind, usually a well-oiled machine of categorization and analysis, felt like a tempest, replaying Lucas's words, his gaze, the way his laughter had brushed against her carefully constructed defenses. Every attempt to compartmentalize the encounter, to file it away under challenging interview or charismatic subject, failed. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Lucas Rain hadn't just dodged her questions, he had ignited something dormant within her, a long-suppressed desire for the unknown, for something beyond her carefully constructed life, flickered to life. It was professionally dangerous, thrillingly so, and utterly terrifying. Her apartment, usually a sanctuary of order and quiet efficiency, now felt stark and almost sterile. The silence, once a comfort, pressed in, a hollow counterpoint to the thrumming energy of Zenith that still vibrated in her memory. Lucas Rain hadn't answered her questions in any way she could distill into an objective profile. Instead, he had given her new ones, about herself, about what she truly desired. The answers, still nebulous and undefined, terrified and thrilled her, leaving her professional blueprint with its first unsettling crack. How could she possibly capture him on a page, when what she truly felt, what she truly needed, defied every rule she lived by?
Chapter 3. Stepping off the grid.
The blank page of her laptop screen mocked Anna. A vast, white expanse. It should have been filled with Lucas Rain's essence, distilled into sharp, incisive prose. Instead, it was a gaping void. Her meticulously organized notes, usually a beacon of clarity, now felt like a jumbled mess. Irrelevant facts, fleeting impressions, all swirling together. Pages of quotes, observations, and background data on Zenith lay scattered, yet none of it captured the restless energy, the subtle defiance, or the magnetic pull of the man himself. Scrunched balls of paper, each representing a failed attempt to distill Lucas into Nexus-approved paragraphs, littered her wastebasket like fallen ambitions. Days bled into each other, each one marked by the same frustrating cycle of intense focus and a stubborn mental block. Her usual disciplined routine fractured. Deadlines loomed, yet she found herself staring out her window, replaying snippets of their first interview. He hadn't answered her questions directly, not in the way she was used to. Still, somehow he'd revealed more about himself and about her than any straightforward exchange ever could. It wasn't just facts she needed for this profile. Not really. It was him. His presence. The chaos he carried. A growing, unsettling urge to return to Zenith pulsed within her, not as a journalist seeking answers, but as someone drawn to an undeniable, unscripted current. The thought alone was a transgression against her professional code. Driven by this new, unsettling impulse, Anna found herself arranging a second meeting. She'd suggested a quiet, discreet restaurant, far from Zenith's opulent shadow, or perhaps a lesser-known art gallery Lucas frequented. The setting itself was a deliberate departure, less formal, less structured than their initial encounter. It felt like a test, a deliberate step away from the familiar. Lucas arrived, a subtle shift in his usual polished demeanor. A hint of something more relaxed softened the edges around his eyes. They talked for hours, ordering another round of drinks, the conversation flowing easily, unburdened by Anna's previous list of questions. The clink of ice in their glasses became a quiet rhythm to their words. He spoke of the city's hidden corners, his passion for obscure art, and a fleeting, almost melancholic mention of a childhood dream he'd never pursued. Anna, in turn, found herself sharing details she rarely divulged. Her early aspirations, the pressures of her career, even a glimpse into the quiet solitude of her life outside Nexus. The words spilled out, surprising her with their ease. Lucas listened, his gaze intense, and Anna felt a strange clarity, a sense of being truly seen in a way few ever had. A shared laugh, a moment of unexpected understanding across the table, sealed a connection that went beyond professional curiosity. He was still guarded, of course, expertly deflecting any inquiry that veered too close to the core of his life, yet he offered just enough, tantalizing glimpses into his layered existence, to keep her utterly fascinated. Her journalist's instinct was now irrevocably tangled with something far more personal. Back at Nexus, the illusion of her perfectly ordered life began to fray. Mark, ever the watchful rival, had noticed. He approached her desk one afternoon, a carefully casual lean against the partition, his voice low but sharp. "Still chasing ghosts, Anna?" He paused, picking at a loose thread on his cuff, his eyes flickering to her screen. "Or has the elusive Mr. Rain finally offered up his secrets?" She bristled, her usual calm facade cracking. Mark's smile didn't reach his eyes. "People are talking, Anna, about your distraction, your unprofessional closeness to the subject. This isn't some romantic novel, it's a profile for Nexus. We expect objectivity, not whatever this is." His words, laced with a familiar competitive edge, still held a surprising undercurrent, a flicker of genuine concern, perhaps quickly masked. "My work is my own, Mark," she retorted, her voice sharper than she intended. "And I'll deliver a profile that will leave your safe, predictable little stories in the dust." He pushed off the partition, his expression hardening. "Just be careful, Anna. Mrs. Hayes isn't known for her patience with personal entanglements. Don't jeopardize your career for a flirtation." The implication stung, a cold splash of reality. But it also fueled a quiet defiance within her. She wasn't just defending her work now, she was defending a growing part of herself. Later that week, during a brief casual visit to Zenith, a quick drink, a shared glance with Lucas from across the room, Anna felt Cale's presence again. He stood by the bar, a silent, imposing shadow, his gaze sweeping the room with an unnerving intensity. As Lucas came to greet her, Cale's eyes lingered on Anna for a fraction too long, a quiet, assessing look that pricked at her growing sense of security. She noticed a faint, almost imperceptible scar tracing his jawline, like a thin white thread against his skin. It wasn't hostile, not overtly, but it was unsettling. Anna returned to her apartment, the evening chill clinging to her coat, the silence amplifying the conflict within her. The profile, once her primary concern, felt like a distant echo. Her structured notes, her professional ethics, even Mark's warnings, seemed to fade against the vibrant, unpredictable current Lucas was creating in her life. With a sigh, she opened her laptop. This wasn't the flawless, objective analysis Nexus expected. It was a placeholder, a vague outline, a deliberate deferral of the truth, a betrayal, perhaps, of everything she'd built. She submitted the skeletal draft, a hollow echo of her usual precision, then closed the lid with a definitive click. It was a conscious step off the grid, a deliberate severing of the carefully constructed safety net of her professional life. Cale's silent watch still pricked at her, a phantom pressure on her skin, a constant reminder of unspoken dangers. But the exhilarating freefall into Lucas's world, a current she could no longer resist, had already begun. The meticulous calendar on her wall, once a sacred guide, already felt like a relic from another life.
Chapter 4. The Embrace of Chaos.
Anna missed her morning yoga, then her editorial meeting. The meticulous calendar on her wall, once a sacred guide, was now just a sheet of paper, its neat grids filled with forgotten appointments. Her gaze swept across the escalating disarray of her apartment. She didn't care. The past weeks had blurred into a thrilling, reckless abandon, forgotten deadlines replaced by a hum beneath her skin. A feeling she hadn't known she possessed. Lucas had become her guide, pulling her into a world of forgotten alleys and vibrant, clandestine art installations, far from the polished chrome of Nexus. Their conversations flowed, easy and unburdened. Lucas spoke of freedom, of the liberating chaos of living outside the lines. Anna found herself echoing his sentiments, confessing her own suffocating need for control, a confession that felt like shedding a heavy skin. She felt seen, truly seen, for the first time. Their hands would brush, then intertwine, a silent promise exchange, the city's low murmur, a constant, comforting pulse against their skin. He took her to a rooftop garden she never knew existed, a secret green haven high above the streets. There, the city lights blurred beneath them, a bright, messy sprawl. For a few precious hours, her old life felt a million miles away, a distant echo she barely recognized. Days bled into weeks, each one a step further from her meticulously structured past, a deeper immersion into Lucas's intoxicating unpredictability. The thought of her pristine desk, her unread emails, was a distant, irrelevant dream. The dream, however, was violently interrupted. The fluorescent lights of Nexus magazine buzzed, a sickly yellow-white glow that made the air feel thin. They seemed harsher than ever when Mark's shadow fell across her desk. His face was tight, his usual smirk replaced by a grim set to his jaw. "Anna," he began, his voice low. "We need to talk." He didn't wait for her to respond, his gaze sweeping over her desk, lingering on a stack of unopened mail. "This isn't about the profile anymore, is it?" A muscle ticked in his jaw. "You're jeopardizing your career for a flirtation. Frankly, it's unprofessional. People are noticing." A hot flush of anger, unfamiliar and fierce, spread through Anna, tightening her chest. "People like you, Mark?" She shot back, her voice sharper than she intended. "What, are you jealous that I'm actually getting somewhere with the story, or just jealous that someone might actually find me interesting?" Mark's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. "This isn't jealousy, Anna, this is concern. Mrs. Hayes is already asking questions about the delay. If you don't submit something substantial soon, I'm going to have to escalate this." His words hung in the air, heavy with a threat she couldn't quite name, but felt in her bones. A flicker of fear touched Anna, cold and sharp, but a stubborn defiance, hotter than any anger, quickly pushed it aside. He couldn't possibly understand. How could Mark, with his perfectly pressed shirts and predictable ambitions, comprehend the pull, the liberation Lucas offered? A small, irrational part of her wondered if that coffee stain, shaped like a misshapen heart, had always been there on the carpet, or if it was a new omen. Mark, seeing the unyielding set of her jaw, a wall he couldn't breach, simply shook his head. He walked away, leaving a bitter aftertaste in the air, a metallic tang of unspoken threat. Anna stared at her screen, the cursor blinking mockingly on the blank document. The choice felt less like a decision, and more like a chasm opening before her. Back in the quiet solitude of her apartment that evening, the city hummed outside. It was a muffled symphony that usually soothed her, a familiar comfort. Tonight, however, the vibration seemed to travel right into her bones. A low, persistent judgment. She paced the worn rug, the words of Mark, Lucas, and her own insistent heart warring within her. Was she being reckless? Perhaps. A knot formed in her stomach at the thought of Mrs. Hayes's steely gaze. But for the first time in her life, she was truly alive, truly herself. This was more than a story, it felt like a transformation. Or maybe she was just tired of being so careful all the time. She read it over, a faint rebellious smile playing on her lips. It was insufficient, professionally negligent, and utterly, defiantly hers. She took a deep breath, the air cool in her lungs, and moved her mouse. The Taka send button clicked, a soft, rebellious finality that echoed in the quiet room. The vague profile of Lucas Rain was out of her hands, and so, it seemed, was the meticulously ordered life she had once so carefully constructed. Her throat felt dry, a sudden parched sensation, but it was quickly replaced by a burgeoning sense of liberation. She was off the grid. For the first time she felt truly alive, the last tendrils of her old obligations finally severed. The city outside hummed, but in the quiet of the apartment, a different kind of peace settled over her, a profound stillness that promised a new dawn. She closed the laptop, letting its screen go dark, and turned towards the warmth that awaited her, a warmth that had already begun to redefine her world, pulling her gently into its orbit.
Chapter 5. The Shattered Illusion.
The morning light, usually so unforgiving, softened the angles of Lucas's face. Anna watched him sleep, a quiet calm, settling deep within her. This, she thought, was the real Lucas, her Lucas finally unburdened. She reached out, her fingers tracing the curve of his jaw, a tentative touch that felt both profoundly intimate and terrifyingly exposed. He stirred, a slow smile unfolding on his lips as his eyes fluttered open. "Morning, stranger," he murmured, his voice a low current that resonated through her bones. "Morning," she managed, her own voice thick with sleep and a blossoming contentment. Here, in his bed, in the quiet apartment, she felt a sense of belonging she hadn't known existed. It was a feeling utterly foreign to her meticulously structured life. They lay tangled for a long while, the world outside receding to a distant hum. Only the soft rhythm of their breathing remained, a shared secret in the waking city. This was a vulnerability she had always guarded against, a complete surrender to the moment, to him. The apartment, often so starkly modern, now felt like a sanctuary, bathed in the gentle, diffused glow of the rising sun. Eventually, the insistent tug of the day, or perhaps just her own body, stirred Anna. She slipped from the sheets, careful not to break the spell, and padded towards the bathroom. Her mind still drifted in the lingering warmth of sleep and intimacy, a pleasant fog she was in no hurry to dispel. Barefoot, she padded down the hallway. A low murmur of voices reached her ears, not the television. Too hushed, too urgent. It came from Lucas's study, a room she rarely entered, always sensing a quiet, unspoken boundary around it. A professional instinct, one she'd actively tried to quiet lately, sparked to life. She paused, leaning closer, her pulse beginning a slow, uneven drum against her ribs. The voices were urgent, barely audible. Lucas's, then Cale's deep, rumbling tone. The shipment, the deal went sideways. Need to move it before morning. The words struck her like a physical blow, a sudden, sickening impact. Her breath hitched, a cold, bitter taste flooding her mouth. The pleasant fog of intimacy dissolved, replaced by a brutal, searing clarity that brought with it a dizzying lurch. Her hands flew to cover her mouth, stifling a choked sound she hadn't known she was about to make. The shadow side of his life, until now a thrilling, romanticized mystery, a delicious danger she had willingly embraced, suddenly solidified into a horrifying concrete reality. Her carefully constructed illusion of safety, of love, of the man she thought she knew, splintered. She stumbled back, pressing herself against the cool plaster, eyes wide and unseeing. The words hammered in her skull, a relentless, horrifying echo. Shipment deal went sideways. Move it before morning. This wasn't some artistic secret, or a hidden passion. This was something dark, illicit, perilous. Her chest ached with a pain so sharp it felt like a tearing, a betrayal far deeper than she had ever conceived. But beneath the wreckage of her heart, something else stirred. Something cold, precise and utterly familiar. The journalist, the meticulous observer, the relentless truth-seeker, the one who thrived on logic and facts, clawed its way through the emotional devastation. Her singular focus on Lucas, on them, twisted and reformed. Anna nodded, the smile fixed, a fragile thing. In a minute, she managed, her voice steadier now, a triumph of will. He leaned forward, kissing her forehead, still oblivious, a warmth that now felt like a brand of deceit. As he turned away, settling back into the pillows, a different kind of map began to unroll in Anna's mind. The city, her apartment, Lucas's life, every familiar detail was suddenly overlaid, with an invisible grid of suspicion, each point a potential clue, each shadow a place to probe. The journalist in her, cold and sharp, had taken the reins, not to mourn the wreckage, but to meticulously chart the dark currents flowing beneath, to expose them, no matter the cost.
Chapter 6. The Double Life.
The city, once Anna's familiar grid, now felt like a map drawn in invisible ink. Every street corner, every shadowed alley, became a potential clue, a hidden layer in Lucas Rain's dangerous double life. Her apartment, usually a haven of quiet, had transformed into a clandestine war room. Pristine surfaces vanished beneath printouts, scribbled notes, and a frantic web of red string connecting names, dates and locations. She worked late into the nights, a knot of exhaustion tightening in her shoulders, her mind a churning mess of betrayal and journalistic hunger. Her first step: re-examine everything she knew about Lucas, but this time through the chilling lens of that overheard conversation. His phone logs, once dismissed as professional calls, were now scrutinized for patterns. Discrepancies emerged, subtle at first, then glaring. Certain numbers recurred, always at odd hours, always from burner phones that vanished from service within days. She used her Nexus access, discreetly of course, to run background checks on the names associated with these numbers, finding nothing concrete, only dead ends and shell companies. It was like chasing ghosts through a digital labyrinth, a frustrating, endless pursuit. A faint sour smell from the fridge wafted through the apartment, a mundane reminder of the life she was neglecting, a life that felt increasingly distant. When the day's demands faded, a different, more dangerous reality took over. During her obligatory visits to Zenith, Anna maintained a front of affectionate normalcy, a performance that grew more taxing with each passing hour. The bar's dim, rich interior, once alluring, now felt like a trap, its velvet and polished wood suffocating. It was here, in the heart of Lucas's empire, that Cale's presence became a palpable weight. He moved with his usual quiet grace, a shadow among shadows, but his eyes, those deep, unreadable pools, seemed to follow her with a new intensity. One evening, as Anna excused herself to the restroom, she felt his gaze on her back, a physical prickle of unease. The air conditioning blasted, raising goosebumps on her arms. When she returned, Cale was standing by the bar, talking to a new bouncer, but his head tilted almost imperceptibly as she passed. His eyes flicked to hers for a fraction of a second too long. He knows something is different, she thought, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. His watchfulness was a constant reminder of the thin ice she walked on. The conflicting demands of Lucas's two lives intensified. He too sensed a shift. His charm, usually so effortless, now had an edge of subtle probing. He would often find her lost in thought, her gaze distant, and his questions, though gentle, were designed to draw her out. "Is everything all right, Anna?" he asked one afternoon over coffee in his apartment, his thumb tracing the rim of her mug. The warmth of the ceramic felt strangely reassuring in her hand. "You've been quiet lately, distant." Anna forced a smile, her mind racing for a plausible explanation. "Just the usual journalistic grind, Lucas," she replied, trying to inject a note of nonchalance into her voice. "Mrs. Hayes is breathing down my neck about the next issue. You know how it is. Deadlines, demanding editors." The lie felt heavy on her tongue. He studied her, his eyes searching, making her feel transparent. The silence stretched, a thin wire between them. "I thought you thrived on that kind of pressure," he murmured, his tone laced with a hint of suspicion. "Or is it something else? Something about me?" A cold, sharp dread hit her stomach. She met his gaze, holding it steady, drawing on every ounce of her professional composure. "Don't be ridiculous," she said, a laugh catching in her throat, a fragile sound. "It's just the usual creative block. Trying to capture the essence of someone as enigmatic as you, Lucas, is proving more challenging than I thought." She leaned forward, feigning a playful curiosity, a journalist's instinct taking over. "In fact, I've been thinking about your business dealings. So many different ventures, so diverse. How do you keep track of it all?" Lucas's expression softened, the suspicion fading, replaced by a familiar, enigmatic smile. He seemed to accept her journalist's curiosity as a cover, even if only partially. "A man has to diversify," he said, a glint in his eye, "especially in this city." The tension, though momentarily diffused, still hummed between them, a silent, unspoken truth of deception and growing suspicion. Back in the quiet apartment, the mask fell. The screen glowed with the details of Horizon Holdings, a shell corporation undeniably linked to Lucas, and a web of questionable property deals. A jolt of triumph shot through Anna, quickly followed by a sickening drop in her gut. This was it, her first tangible proof. But the exhilaration curdled into a cold dread, as the true, dangerous scope of Lucas's enterprise became terrifyingly clear. The digital breadcrumbs had led her to the edge of a chasm, and with chilling certainty, she knew she had no choice but to look inside.
Chapter 7. Drawing Closer to the Edge.
The screen of Anna's terminal glowed, a digital canvas of illicit whispers and fragmented truths hidden in plain sight. Each click, each anonymous search pulled her deeper into the labyrinth, her heart thrumming with a dangerous exhilaration. The memory of the Shell Corporation and the questionable property deals from the night before, still prickled at the back of her mind, a tangible thread in Lucas's intricate web. She began with Nexus's proprietary databases, a treasure trove usually reserved for high-level investigations, now her clandestine playground. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, a familiar rhythm of purpose, yet each keystroke felt weighted with a new kind of risk. What if Lucas had eyes even here? The thought sent a tremor through her, but the need to know pushed it aside. She cross-referenced Lucas Rain's name with recent property acquisitions, then broadened her search to include Zenith Bar and unexplained wealth. The results were initially sparse, a digital silence, then a flicker. Old news clippings, almost buried in the archives, hinted at disappearances and unexplained incidents linked to high-end establishments. A vague mention of Zenith's early days surfaced. It was all circumstantial, whispers really, but the pattern was forming, chillingly clear. Later that day, the quiet hum of the Nexus office was shattered by a familiar, unwelcome presence. The air grew thick with unspoken questions. Mark loomed over her desk, his usual competitive smirk replaced by a furrowed brow. "Anna, we need to talk," he began, his voice surprisingly low, devoid of its usual bluster. She looked up, her expression a careful mask of professional indifference, though her pulse quickened. The last thing she needed was Mark's attention. "About what, Mark?" "My article's progressing." He leaned closer, his gaze sweeping over her, taking in the faint shadows under her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands she couldn't quite hide. "Progressing? You look like you haven't slept in weeks. What is happening to you?" His voice held a genuine, almost desperate note of concern that pierced through her carefully constructed defenses. It was a vulnerability she hadn't expected from him, and it unnerved her. The implication hit her with a sudden chill. She bristled, the unexpected tenderness feeling like an assault on her carefully guarded secret. It felt too close, too invasive. "Nothing is happening, Mark. I'm busy. Unlike some people, I take my assignments seriously." He shook his head, a defeated sigh escaping him. "This isn't about the assignment anymore, is it? It's about him. Lucas Rain. You're unraveling, Anna, and I'm worried." The accusation stung, yet it was painfully close to the truth. She gripped her pen tighter. "My personal life is none of your business," she snapped, gathering her notes with a deliberate, aggressive rustle. He stared at her for a long moment, his concern morphing into a frustrated helplessness. The silence stretched, heavy and charged, before he finally turned and walked away, leaving her isolated and seething. The quiet he left behind was heavier than his words, a new unease settling in her stomach. As dusk settled over the city, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges, Anna found herself driving through an unfamiliar industrial landscape. Her gaze drifted to the deepening shadows, each one a potential hiding place. The address she'd unearthed, a seemingly innocuous P.O. box linked to one of Lucas's shell corporations, had led her here, a secluded warehouse district, far from the glittering facade of the city center. The air was thick, with the smell of damp concrete and something metallic, a tangible chill settling in her bones that had nothing to do with the evening air. She parked her car a block away, blending into the shadows cast by towering, anonymous buildings. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence as she crept along the perimeter of the designated warehouse. The building was dark, seemingly deserted, but a faint hum of machinery emanated from within, a low thrum that sent shivers down her spine. She peered through a gap in a rusty corrugated metal fence, trying to discern shapes in the gloom. Suddenly, a sound. Not the machinery, but a distinct crunch of gravel behind her. She froze, every muscle tensing, the hairs on her neck standing on end, her breath caught. A shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness, tall and broad-shouldered, moving with an unnerving, predatory grace. Not Cale, but someone just as menacing, his face obscured by the fading light. This was no mere coincidence. This was a trap, or at least, she'd stumbled into something she shouldn't have seen. Without thinking, she bolted, a primal scream caught in her throat. The chase was a blur of pounding feet, desperate gasps, and the terrifying echo of his heavier strides behind her. She ducked between stacks of forgotten pallets, squeezed through narrow gaps, the metallic tang of fear filling her mouth. He was fast, relentless, his presence a dark, suffocating weight. Just as his hand brushed her jacket, she dove headfirst into an abandoned dumpster, the stench of decay momentarily overwhelming her. The lid slammed shut above her, plunging her into absolute darkness. The muffled thud of his footsteps grew fainter, then faded altogether. She lay there, trembling, for what felt like an eternity, the reality of her precarious situation crashing down on her with brutal force. Later that night, back in Lucas's apartment, a forced calm settled over her. Every nerve ending screaming, she nodded, feigning ignorance, but inside, a cold resolve hardened, displacing the last vestiges of fear. Lucas's words, soft as a lover's promise, had been a blade, twisting the terror of the warehouse into something sharper, more personal. He knew, and knowing that he knew, left her with only one path. No more doubt, no more hesitation. The quiet threat in his gaze, the unsettling shift in his smile. It ignited a frantic clarity within her. She had enough. More than enough. And now, fueled by a buzzing energy that hummed beneath her skin, Anna knew she had no choice but to lay it all bare. The evidence waited, demanding to be seen, to be understood, to be used. And she would start tonight.
Chapter 8. The Shadow's Grip.
The warehouse encounter hadn't broken Anna, it had simply honed her. A buzzing energy, a frantic clarity, now surged through her veins, displacing the lingering fear as she spread her evidence across the floor. Her apartment, usually a haven of order, had become a chaotic landscape of documents, scribbled notes, and printed emails. The air hung heavy with the faint scent of stale coffee and printer ink. A single lamp cast long dancing shadows, making the towering piles of paper seem to writhe in the dim light. The terror from the previous night hadn't vanished, it had curdled instead into a cold, unyielding resolve. There was no turning back. Her movements were precise, almost surgical. Printouts of Shell Corporation registries lay scattered, interspersed with cryptic financial reports. She cross-referenced them with her own meticulous observations. Lucas's known movements, the unusual visitors to Zenith, the hushed conversations she'd overheard, each connection she made, each delicate line she drew between disparate facts, tightened the noose around his carefully constructed world. Her fingers flew, highlighting, circling, linking names and dates and addresses. Slowly, a tangled mess of red string and ink began to coalesce into a chilling pattern. The floor became a sprawling, dangerous diagram, revealing a sophisticated network of illicit trade. She paused, absently rubbing a crick in her neck, a fleeting thought of the downstairs door. Had she locked it? A whisper of vulnerability amidst the rising tide of discovery. This wasn't mere smuggling. It was a multifaceted operation, a hydra-headed beast. Valuable artifacts one day, sensitive data the next. Each illicit transaction laundered through dizzying layers of legitimate-looking businesses. Zenith, the elegant bar, wasn't merely a front, it was the very heart of the web. A hub where deals were struck and information exchanged, all under the polished veneer of high society. The sheer audacity of it, the intricate deception, made her stomach clench, a cold dread settled in her chest. She held the story of a lifetime, a truth that promised to tear Lucas Rain's world, and perhaps his very identity, to shreds. The next morning the city was awash of grey. A thin mist clung to everything, blurring the hard edges of skyscrapers, muting the usual urban roar to a distant hum. Anna found herself in a quiet corner of a public park, the benches slick with damp, the cold already seeping into her jeans. The anonymity, however, was a balm. She'd received an untraceable text, a single, stark instruction: park, noon, alone. No signature was necessary. A figure emerged from the swirling mist, moving with a familiar, almost unnerving quietness. Cale, Lucas's silent shadow, seemed even more imposing in the muted light, his dark suit blending seamlessly with the damp, skeletal trees. Anna's breath hitched. A jolt of unease, cold and sharp, pierced through her. Cale rarely spoke, let alone initiated contact. He stopped a few feet away, his expression a blank slate. "He knows you're digging," Cale said, his voice a low rumble. It was devoid of his usual menace, yet carried an undeniable weight, a gravitas that cut through the damp air. Anna met his gaze, refusing to flinch. "Does he?" she challenged, her voice steady, though a tremor had begun deep in her hands. Cale's eyes held hers. For a fraction of a second, she thought she saw a flicker of something uncharacteristic there, a softening. He paused, then continued. "Lucas cares about you, Anna, more than he's ever cared about anyone." The words hit her with unexpected force, a sudden disorienting lurch in her carefully constructed resolve. Coming from Cale, the revelation was strange, unsettling. "But you're digging in places where the ground isn't stable. If you keep going, he won't be able to protect you from his partners." The implication hung heavy in the damp air, a chilling expansion of the danger. It wasn't just Lucas she was up against anymore, it was a larger, more ruthless entity. "His partners?" Anna whispered, the question barely audible, lost in the swirling mist. Cale merely shook his head, a grin set to his jaw. "Walk away, Anna, before it's too late for both of you." He turned abruptly, disappearing into the mist as silently as he had appeared. Anna stood alone, the cold dampness seeping into her bones. Cale's words echoing in her mind. Lucas cared for her. The thought was a strange warmth in the cold, but the world he inhabited was too vast, too dangerous to allow for such sentiment. Back in the apartment, the afternoon light, weak and watery, filtered through the windows, stretching long shadows across the floor. Anna sat amidst her evidence, Cale's warning a dull ache behind her ribs. Lucas's affection, if it was real, only complicated things, twisting the moral dilemma into a knot in her gut. She still cared for him, a painful, unwelcome truth that warred fiercely with her journalistic integrity. But Cale's words had also clarified something, cutting through the emotional fog. This wasn't just about Lucas anymore. This was about a network, a dangerous, sprawling system that threatened far more than one man. With a deep breath, she returned to her work, her movements now precise, deliberate. She organized her findings into a comprehensive dossier, meticulously cross-referenced financial records, shell company registrations, encrypted communications, even a few blurry photos from her warehouse excursion. Each page felt like a hammer blow to Lucas's carefully constructed world, an explosive exposé that would not only ruin him, but potentially unravel a vast criminal enterprise. The sheer weight of that power, its destructive potential, made her hands tremble. She picked up a small, discreet recording device, testing its functions with a practiced hand. It was sleek, barely noticeable, a tiny black rectangle that fit easily into her palm. Her plan was taking shape, cold and calculated. A public place, she decided, neutral ground, where the sheer number of witnesses might offer a fragile shield. A restaurant, bustling with the evening crowd perhaps. It was the only way she could think of to ensure her safety, to get the story out, to finally bring the truth to light, without vanishing into the shadows herself. Anna tucked the recording device into her bag, the weight of the truth, a physical ache in her shoulder. She envisioned the elegant dining room, the hushed conversations, the clinking of glasses, a veneer of civility over the precipice she was about to push them both toward. Neutrality, she knew, was an illusion. Tomorrow she would walk into that restaurant and it would become a crucible. Whatever emerged from its heat would be irreversible.
Chapter 9. The Abyss and the Reckoning.
The elegant restaurant was a cage. Lucas Rain, the trapped animal. Anna laid out the evidence, piece by meticulous piece, each document a nail in the coffin of his intricately woven deception. The air, usually thick with the scent of expensive perfume and hushed ambition, now felt thin, brittle. It stretched over a chasm of unspoken accusations. Lucas, seated opposite her in the secluded booth, wore his usual tailored precision, but the subtle tremor in his hand as he reached for his water glass betrayed him. His dark suit, usually a statement of power, seemed to hang a little heavier on him tonight, a shroud rather than an armor. "I believe we have a lot to discuss, Lucas," Anna began. Her voice, carefully modulated, betrayed none of the earthquake rumbling beneath her own composure. She noticed a faint, almost imperceptible stain on the white tablecloth, a small imperfection in an otherwise flawless setting. His eyes, usually pools of enigmatic charm, flickered with a raw vulnerability she hadn't seen before. A brief, unguarded moment. He leaned back, a ghost of his usual suave smile playing on his lips. A desperate attempt to maintain control. "Oh? And what might that be, Anna?" he asked, the question light, almost mocking. Yet his gaze was fixed on her satchel with an unnerving intensity. Anna ignored it. She pulled a file from her elegant leather satchel. The first document, a precisely compiled ledger, slid across the polished table. Lucas's gaze dropped to it. The smile vanished, replaced by a flicker of disbelief, then a slow, dawning comprehension. "This," Anna continued, her finger tracing a line of figures, "is just the beginning. Shell corporations, offshore accounts, the movements of unmarked shipments through your legitimate businesses." He pushed the ledger away, a muscle twitching in his jaw, the only visible sign of his unraveling control. "Anna, what is this?" he demanded, his voice low, laced with a dangerous edge. "A game?" "No game, Lucas," she replied, her own resolve hardening against the familiar, insidious pull of his presence. A phantom ache stirred in her chest, a memory of how easily he used to disarm her, to make her forget everything but him. "This is the truth. The one you've kept hidden behind Zenith's velvet ropes, and your captivating facade." She laid out another document, a photograph of a grimy warehouse she'd identified. Then a third, a printout of coded communications she'd painstakingly deciphered. Each item was a hammer blow, dismantling the carefully constructed world he'd presented to her, piece by agonizing piece. He watched her, the anger slowly draining from his face, replaced by a profound, almost bone-deep weariness. The fight had gone out of him. He admitted to the network, the illicit trade, the intricate web of deception. He spoke in a low, even tone, a confession that felt less like a surrender and more like a heavy burden finally dropped, a weight lifted from his shoulders. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over Anna, a grim satisfaction at uncovering the truth, yes, but also a profound sorrow for the man sitting before her, the man she'd once believed in completely. "Why, Lucas?" she whispered, the journalist in her momentarily eclipsed by the woman who had loved him, who still, impossibly did. He finally looked up, his eyes raw, stripped bare. "My family," he began, his voice rough. "They were ruined, not by chance, but by men who saw opportunity in their downfall. I was a kid, helpless. I swore I'd never be that again. I vowed I'd make them pay." He spoke of a past debt, a family destroyed, a need for vengeance that had twisted into a means of protection, a desperate shield forged in the fires of loss. His voice was rough, filled with a regret that felt genuine, painting a picture of a man trapped by circumstances he'd created but could no longer control. A king in a cage of his own making. He spoke of protecting the few people he still cared about, of the impossible choices he'd been forced to make, the compromises that had become his life, his very identity. It was a confession that chipped away at her righteous anger, revealing the complex broken man beneath the mask. Not a villain perhaps, but a victim of his own making. A long moment passed, heavy with unspoken truths, with the ghosts of their shared past. Anna's fingers, cold despite the warmth of the restaurant, tapped a nervous rhythm on the table, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. Just as the weight of his words settled between them, A sudden, jarring crash from the main dining area shattered the fragile piece. The elegant murmur of conversation ceased, replaced by gasps and the scrape of chairs, a sudden, brutal silence. Lucas's head snapped up, his eyes instantly alert, the weariness replaced by a primal, dangerous instinct. He didn't even flinch. His gaze was already scanning, assessing, a predator sensing danger. Before Anna could process the shift, two figures, broad and menacing, stormed into their secluded section. Their faces were grim, their movements swift and practiced. They carried no obvious weapons, but their intent was clear, their presence radiating a cold, lethal menace that chilled the air. "They found us," Lucas breathed, his hand instinctively reaching for Anna's arm, pulling her closer, a protective reflex she hadn't expected. Chaos erupted. Patrons screamed, scattering like startled birds as the figures moved with brutal efficiency, overturning tables, creating a path of destruction towards them. One of the men lunged, but a blur of motion intercepted him. Cale, silent as ever, materialized from the shadows near their booth, his imposing frame, a sudden formidable barrier. A silent sentinel. He moved with a controlled ferocity, a whirlwind of precise strikes and blocks, deflecting the initial assault with brutal grace. A chair splintered. A glass display case shattered, sending glittering shards across the floor. Anna felt Lucas's grip tighten on her, pulling her down, shielding her, as Cale engaged the attackers, in a desperate, brutal dance of survival. The air thrummed with the violence, the shouts of the thugs, the grunts of impact, the sharp scent of fear. Cale, despite being outnumbered, held his ground, his loyalty, a tangible force in the maelstrom. A rock in a raging current. He landed a decisive blow, sending one assailant reeling, buying them a precious, fleeting moment. "Go," Lucas urged, pushing her towards a dimly lit service exit. His face was etched with desperation, his eyes pleading, a raw, naked fear for her safety. Anna stumbled, her mind reeling from the sudden terrifying shift from emotional confrontation to visceral, immediate danger. Her hand instinctively went to her pocket, where the small, inconspicuous recording device lay, a cold, hard truth against her skin. It contained everything: his confession, the details of his operations, the devastating truth. The sounds of Cale fighting, the screams of the remaining patrons, the crash of breaking china, all seemed to fade, becoming a distant, muffled hum. The world narrowed to this booth, this moment. All that remained was Lucas's desperate gaze, the weight of the device in her hand, and the impossible choice that had been thrust upon her, a cruel twist of fate. To publish the story, expose Lucas, bring down his network, uphold her journalistic integrity. It meant risking both their lives to the ruthless partners, who clearly wanted them silenced, but it was the path of righteous truth. Or to destroy the evidence, sacrifice the truth, protect the man she loved, and abandon the very principles that defined her, that had driven her for years. It meant saving him but losing herself. The abyss yawned before her, a gaping maw between the truth she had sought and the love she had found, threatening to swallow her whole. The choice hung, heavy and terrible, in the air. Anna's hand trembled, poised between the recording device in her pocket and Lucas's desperate, pleading eyes. The clamor of the fight outside receded further, replaced by the deafening beat of her own heart. A life, or the truth. A future with him, or the legacy of her convictions. The cost of either decision felt unbearable. Her fingers tightened around the cold plastic of the device, then loosened, then tightened again. His eyes, fixed on hers, held a silent plea, a mirror of the desperation in her own soul. Then, with a sharp intake of breath that felt like a tear in the fabric of the world, Anna's hand moved. A faint click, almost imperceptible, resonated not in the booth but deep within the hollow of her chest. The clamor of the fight outside, the crash of breaking china, all seemed to vanish, replaced by a sudden, profound quiet that descended upon Zenith like a shroud. The cold plastic of the device, now warm with the heat of its activation, felt impossibly heavy in her palm, a lead weight of truth unleashed. Lucas's face, frozen in a silent plea, became a landscape of sorrow she knew she would carry forever.
Chapter 10. Aftermath and New Horizons.
The silence that followed Anna's choice was deafening. A vast, echoing void broken only by the distant wail of sirens. Not a symphony, she thought, but a jarring cacophony. The first notes of consequences about to unfold. The air still thrummed, a phantom vibration of Cale's desperate defense, and the frantic shouts that had filled Zenith. Now the bar was a ghost of its former self, a skeleton of shattered glass and twisted metal. Anna stood amidst the debris, the recording device warm in her hand, its tiny red light a stark, unblinking confirmation of the truth she had unleashed. The ringing in her ears slowly faded, replaced by the crunch of broken glass underfoot. Only then did the initial shock begin to recede, leaving a cold, sharp edge. When the authorities finally breached the remnants of the bar, their faces grim and set, Anna felt a strange blend of exhaustion and a chilling clarity. Her statement was concise, precise, a journalist's account stripped of emotion, even as her chest felt hollow, a raw ache settling deep beneath her ribs. Lucas was led away, his hands cuffed behind him, his eyes finding hers across the chaos. A flicker of something passed between them. Sorrow, yes, but also a strange, quiet understanding that cut deeper than betrayal. Cale, surprisingly, was not among the captured. He had vanished into the night, a phantom as elusive as the shadows he protected. A heavy quiet settled over the scene, broken only by the distant hum of a generator struggling to life. Days blurred into a haze of fluorescent lights and hushed voices. Interviews, legal consultations, the slow, grinding process of the law. It all ran together. Anna, now a central figure in a burgeoning scandal, found herself at the epicenter of a media storm. The irony was a bitter taste on her tongue. She, the meticulous journalist, was no longer just a journalist. She was the journalist who had exposed the city's most enigmatic figure, the woman who had brought down Zenith. It felt less like a title and more like a brand, etched onto her skin, a permanent mark. Eventually the time came to return to Nexus. The familiar hum of the office, once a comforting rhythm, now felt alien, charged with unspoken judgments and whispers that seemed to cling to the air. Mark was waiting. His usual smugness was gone, replaced by something Anna couldn't quite place. Respect, envy, maybe even a flicker of concern, though she doubted it. "So the straight-laced Anna Morel brings down the whole damn house," he began, his voice low, devoid of its usual taunt. He leaned back, watching her. Anna met his gaze, no longer intimidated by his barbs. "It wasn't about bringing anyone down, Mark," she replied, her voice steady, an unexpected calm in its tone. "It was about the truth." His eyes narrowed, searching her face for something, perhaps the old Anna, the one who meticulously organized her desk and never stepped out of line. But she was gone. The meeting with Mrs. Hayes was less of a confrontation and more of a reckoning. The editor sat behind her imposing desk, her expression unreadable, a fortress of professionalism. "Morel," Mrs. Hayes began, her voice crisp, cutting through the silence. "You've delivered the biggest scoop this magazine has seen in a decade. A Pulitzer-worthy piece, some are saying." Anna felt no surge of triumph, no swell of pride, just a dull ache behind her eyes, and the lingering taste of metallic dust on her tongue, a ghost of the explosion. Mrs. Hayes brought up the ethical lines Anna had crossed, the personal entanglement, the blurred boundaries. "Reckless," she'd called it. Anna just nodded, letting the words wash over her like a cold shower. She acknowledged the validity of the concerns, but stood firm in her conviction, a quiet resolve, hardening her jaw. "I understand the risks, Mrs. Hayes." The outcome was a complex compromise. Anna would keep her job, but her reputation, while soaring in some circles, was irrevocably stained in others. She was no longer the queen of order, the meticulous planner, but a maverick, an unpredictable force. She accepted the terms, knowing that the pristine blueprint of her life had been permanently redrawn, its neat lines smudged and torn. Which meant, despite everything, a new path lay open. A little terrifying, perhaps. Months passed. Anna moved from her perfectly curated apartment, its minimalist lines now feeling like a cage, finding a new space in a vibrant, slightly chaotic part of the city. Her desk, once so perfectly organized it was almost a joke, now held a scattering of notes, coffee rings, and a single, faded photograph of Zenith before the fall, a reminder of the quiet before the storm. Lucas was serving his time, his network dismantled, his secrets laid bare for the world to see. Sometimes, Anna wondered if Cale was still out there, a shadow among shadows, watching. A ghost, a silent protector who had simply vanished, but not entirely from her mind. Anna often found herself staring out her window at the sprawling metropolis below, the city lights a scattered constellation. Sometimes, she'd catch herself humming an old song her mother used to sing, a forgotten melody completely unrelated to anything, yet comforting. Other times, her thoughts drifted to Lucas, the man who'd torn her world apart, yes, but also, in a strange, unsettling way, pieced her back together. The pain of their broken connection was a dull throb, a constant reminder of the cost of her truth, but alongside it, a profound sense of self had blossomed, a quiet strength she hadn't known she possessed. A new, fragile sense of purpose began to take root, like a stubborn weed pushing through concrete, finding life in unexpected cracks. She had chased the unknown, embraced the chaos, and emerged not unscathed, but undeniably whole. The fear of what lay beyond her control had been replaced by a quiet understanding that life, in all its messy glory, was meant to be lived, not just observed from a safe distance. Her work now had a different edge, a deeper purpose. She sought not just facts but the human stories tangled in the fabric of truth, even when those truths were uncomfortable, dangerous, or heartbreaking. She understood that some truths weren't found in structured lists or carefully crafted questions, but in the raw, unpredictable depths of human connection and impossible choices. The scars she carried, both visible and invisible, were testaments to a life truly lived, a life no longer confined by the rigid lines of a blueprint. Anna looked out at the sprawling metropolis, no longer seeing a city of blueprints, but a vibrant, unpredictable mix of light and shadow, order and chaos. Her life was messy now, scarred and uncertain, but it was irrevocably, authentically her own. And for the first time, Anna Morel felt truly free.
If you enjoyed this audiobook, a like and subscription to Soundscape Books would mean a lot.